I would say is your actions have to match your words, right? If I say I'm gonna go do something, but when I get home from work, I do nothing else to acquire said goal or dream, then my actions speak way louder than my words. And so I think for me, I was more along the lines of like, let me just go do it. I'm just gonna act, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna keep my mouth shut, I'm gonna hone in my skills, and eventually it's gonna pop up. Welcome to episode 2 of Married Making Millions with James and Angela. And today we want to talk a little bit about our story and give you all an idea or an open book into kind of like where we met, how we grew in marriage. So that'll be very brief, very quick. And then we'll kind of get into where some light bulbs turned on, where some things changed for us, and where we really started to see maybe the trajectory of our life kind of start to go into a different direction, which is cool. So I'm going to let Angela tell you about the story of how we met, and I will just provide some commentary. So why don't you take it over?
Perfect. I'll try to make it brief. We met 14 years ago now. Actually more than that, 15 years ago now. We both went to Clearwater Christian College, and we met in history class.
Yes. Mr. Partridge's history class.
Correct.
Yes.
We'll make a long story short. We met in college, and he showed up at my front doorstep on a college break. Asked me to be his girlfriend. Very romantic, by the way. Very romantic.
And
then a year later proposed, and I said yes, of course. And then we got married 9 months later, and he was in the military at that time. So we moved to Hawaii within 3 weeks of being married.
Yeah, it was a little bit more than that. Went to boot camp in October, got married in September, boot camp in October.
That's right.
Hawaii
you
in
left.
January 1st or
right.
December something.
So you left 3 weeks after we got married.
Weeks, yeah. So we started marriage off really, really great, everyone. I was in boot camp longer than we were married. 8 weeks in boot camp, 3 weeks married together. We started off solid.
Yeah, I don't recommend that. But it's what we knew, and it's what James knew. He needed to have a good, solid job with benefits.
So secure.
It felt secure, right?
Yeah.
So we were getting married. We were very young. And so he took on that role and responsibility, and part of that was obviously going to be moving. So, yeah, that's how we started off.
So one thing I would just add to that, and this is applicable in business and marriage 100%, is that before I decided to propose to you, I asked some people. Like I sought some wisdom, I sought some counsel. Yeah. My dad was one of them, my mom was one of them. The pastor from the old church that I was at was another one. And then the pastor, Steve Brower, at the current church that I was at your church. And I just said, hey, like, I love Angela. I want to provide for her. I want to take care of her. Here's what I'm thinking. And my parents gave me some solid advice. I was working construction at the time, making like 15, 16 bucks an hour with no benefits, medical or anything like that. And they said, well, you really shouldn't get married when you don't have any benefits for your wife. You don't have any medical, you don't have family anything, right? And that was wise advice because you just don't know what's going to happen. So I always wanted to join the military, and the Coast Guard was something I sought counsel from another individual who was very high up in the Air Force, and my biggest thing was I didn't want to kill people, I didn't want to shoot people. I wanted to do something different, and he's like, well, you should look into the Coast Guard. Like, I know a lot of good buddies in the Coast Guard. And so that's how the Coast Guard happened. But the premise of that is asking for counsel, wisdom. Jeff and I, who's my business partner, and Angela as well now, we do that with all of our business ventures, and we've done that with our marriage. Is to seek people that are where you want to be, or have done it before you. Why make the same mistake that other people have made if you can avoid it, right?
Right.
So I think that was an important point to that is seeking other people's
Right.
counsel before that. Now, I will tell you, one of the pastors that I spoke with highly recommended not getting married and going right into the military for the specific reason that Angela mentioned, being married for 3 weeks, leaving for 8. And I just prayed about it, thought about it, and decided and thought that this was the actual right path. So you don't always go with everyone's
Right.
wisdom,
Right.
but you seek many counselors, and obviously the Proverbs talks about that, is seeking many wise counselors, and you'll make better decisions. So that was a paraphrase, by the way. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, so that's kind of, like I said, a quick version of our story. Met in college. James joined the Coast Guard. We moved to Hawaii at that point for about a year and a half. That was
Worked on our tan.
that was
Kind of.
rough, yeah, for our marriage in general. Just because I had never been away from my family before, and now I'm married to this man, and you kind of have this idea in your head of what it's supposed to look like, and how, he's going to be around, and we're going to be a family, and it's going to be this certain picture. So I'd say for the very first time in our relationship, early on, we're about 3 months into marriage. My expectations were not met how I thought they were going to be. We bought a townhouse, or we were renting a townhouse, and I remember having to drop him off at the airport so that he could go meet his ship for deployment, and we had no stuff. Like, I had no bed to sleep on. I didn't have they were still in the middle of the ocean coming across with all of our goods. I had a suitcase, and I think we had an air mattress or something on the floor. And I remember, what did I get myself into? That's what I was thinking. So that Hawaii for me was a really pivotal point where I had to learn that my husband was not going to fulfill me in the way that I had thought or had kind of been told, or just kind of imagined, I guess, that it would be. So Hawaii was hard, but good for me in that way, where I very quickly learned, I cannot rely on him to fulfill me in ways that only Christ can fulfill me. So we were able to leave Hawaii fairly quickly because he was deployed a lot during that time. He was actually off the island more than he was on the island with me.
It's pretty terrible.
So thankfully the Lord allowed us to move pretty quickly from there to Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Good old PA, great state of PA.
Yeah.
So yeah, we call it an advancement in the military. So I got an advancement into a new rank and moved to Philadelphia, where, we just plugged in. And I really feel like, and we can talk about this, I think we'll probably spend a decent amount of time on this section of our history, if you will, because this was really a pivotal point in our marriage. So not only our marriage, but our self-development and in business, where we kind of felt the calling to that avenue, if you will. And so we moved to Pennsylvania in 2013. 2013.
Yep.
Yep, summer of 2013. We were in Hawaii a year and a half-ish, beginning of 12 to 13. So the first thing that I think is really important to understand is, and I didn't understand or recognize this as much as I do now, but when we first moved, we had thoughts of buying a house. You remember that?
Yeah.
Right? Instead of renting. So in the military, you get something called BAH, Basic Allowance for Housing. And it's a certain amount of money depending on the region of country that you live in. Well, here in Pennsylvania, I think it was close to $1,800 or $2,000 being married with a dependent. I think it was somewhere around there.
That.
A little hazy. It's different now, but depending on the part of country. Anyways, so we had a specific budget, and we weren't going to go over that.
Right.
And we thought we wanted to live in this one area of the outskirts of Philadelphia. We ended up staying there in a long-term hotel for I think a week maybe, and they were like, this is not where we want to be. And that was like northeast Philadelphia, like way outside the city, and my base was literally on the Delaware River, Penn's Landing on the city. And so it was like an hour and 10 drive in. I'm like, this is not gonna work. So one day you were driving, south? You went south down to the Delaware border.
We actually ended up staying there, remember?
That hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was
rough.
the
Do you remember that
Lord.
one hotel with the
Yes.
mice and the people
That was
that didn't
awful.
speak English, and that was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're moving with the military,
Oh my gosh.
until you have a certain amount of time to find something, and we
Yeah, they give you limited time.
yeah. So we ended up in a long-term rental, but in between moving and the rental, we were in
Hotel.
hotels, and it was awful.
Yeah, that was wild.
But
I wrote them a
did
really
end up
bad
in,
review, and then I called the health inspector about it.
Yeah, it was terrible.
So bad. Another story for a different day.
But I drove down towards Delaware for something, and I don't even remember why
It was like
or
a
what.
wedding. It was like I thought it was a show or something.
I don't
Wedding
remember.
show, or maybe it was a tattoo.
Home. No, it was
Expo?
Home Expo, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe
That
a
would've been
design
Philly.
expo. Anyway, we digress. So something brought Angela down to that area, and she's like, "We got to check this out. Really nice area." So we ended up finding a realtor through USAA. If you remember, I think his name was Derek. Wasn't his
Yeah,
name Derek?
Posh.
Really? Yeah, Derek Posh. That's too funny. Really nice guy, and he found us a place that we loved. 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, or 2.5 bathroom with a 2-car garage. Like, we were way out of our mind, but it was totally a God thing. At the time, we could only afford $200,000. That was going to be our mortgage, monthly payment, everything. And the house was listed at $250,000, $260,000, I think.
I don't remember if it was that high. It was
Yeah.
definitely over our budget.
It was over $250,000, I know that. And Derek was like, "There's no way that you're going to get
Yeah.
this house." We submitted an offer. They declined. We resubmitted an offer, pretty much the same thing, didn't change almost anything.
with a letter. We
With a
did
letter,
write
that's
a
right.
letter and
That's right.
showed a picture of us.
Yeah.
Here's this poor young couple.
Yeah, but what happened was they had 2 homes. They had a home down on the Jersey Shore, and they had a home here. And
They were trying to get rid of it.
we believe it was God's will and providence that they sold that house to us. So we got the house for $200,000, and it needed some work. It was definitely livable, but we had some experience in the construction and so on. And yeah, so that becomes one of our investment properties. As we know that we're going to end up getting out of the military or leaving the military, we're going to want to sell it or rent it. And so in the back of our mind, we had that idea of, well, why rent? Because if we rent, we're just going to spend that money and give it to somebody and have no asset in the end. And I didn't fully comprehend that. I just knew that this is probably the right thing to do, so that it's like a big savings account. When you sell it, you cash it back out and you get the money. And that's exactly what happened. I think we made 60 or 70,000 on it. I mean, we put a brand new roof on it. We did a lot of work in the bathrooms and then the kitchen. So we did some work.
And the other thing too was that when James was it when you turned 21? His grandmother left each of the boys a chunk of cash that we were able to use as our down payment. So I think also
was a big
without
help.
that, yeah, it might have looked a little bit different because we were young. We were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
Didn't have money. I was a school teacher at that time. Actually, I was working as a para in the special education department, but we didn't have any money besides what he was making through the Coast Guard and then what I was making as a teacher. So his grandma's chunk of change allowed us to also put the down payment down on the house, which definitely helped.
Yeah, 100%. So that was fantastic. We ended up securing that. That was in 2013. And then I would say 2014, 2015 start rolling around. We start making some really good friends at our church in Delaware that we were going to. And we both finished college. I finished my bachelor's degree at Wilmington University. And I'm thinking, you know, FBI, Secret Service, special agent, or I'm thinking get out. And I really battled with that, I think, for a while. But before that, one of the biggest things was we wanted to get out of debt. We wanted to become financially free. We wanted to just, and I don't know a pivotal point when that turned on. I do specifically remember, like, we just started crushing Dave Ramsey podcasts. Anywhere we drove, we were just learning and learning and learning. And then we just started looking at our budget every week, every month. We started using cash, I think,
We did, yeah.
to pay for stuff. You did a really great job at that.
So I think there was a lot of different little things that I think of, like breadcrumbs along our path. Like I said, we were a school teacher. he was in the Coast Guard. He was leaving a lot. There was a lot of little things that kind of, I think, pressed us towards wanting something different. There was a little something in both of us that was like, there has to be something more than this. Like, what are we doing? And, we also both grew up, we have our stories from when we were
I grew up
children.
poor. I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up very humble and poor.
But our backgrounds played into that role as well, and into our marriage. And so we knew we wanted something different. Some things the same, but some things different. So there was just this this push-pull
emptiness
in us. We saw the rat race around us, and it was like, is this what we're gonna do for forever?
Yeah.
So I think there was just these little pieces along the way that kept pushing us to want something more.
People that we met too.
We have always had business. James grew up in a family with business. I grew up in a family with business. So there was that aspect too, that I think eventually we kind of knew we didn't want to work for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so being young and in debt, now I came into the marriage with debt, I will say. Because I went to school, and that's what we were told. You go to school and then you make money. Well, little did I know that as a school teacher, it would take me years to pay off that debt that I had accumulated. And so thankfully, he did not have hardly any debt, because his parents had kind of showed him, and he worked through high school and into college. So he graciously took on that debt as we got married. So I think that was a big thing over our heads, was we did have debt, and I knew that didn't feel quite right. I knew I wanted to be free from that. So that's where Dave Ramsey, was one of the little breadcrumbs. Dave Ramsey came along, and we were serious about it.
Do you remember listening in the car? And
all the time.
And it was
that's all we did.
That's all we did. And we used to be able to oh, this is what Dave's going to say. The caller would call in. And
we would be able to solve their
problem.
We knew what Dave would answer before he actually answered.
I got an $800 a month Audi payment.
Yeah.
Well, sell it, you dummy.
Yeah. So that was what we thought was fun.
Yeah.
But because of that, and seriously buckling down and using cash for everything, we did get out of debt within
maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So I think we had about $20,000 in your student loans, close to 20. And then I think the car was 11 or 12.
Yep.
We didn't have any credit card debt, because I knew that was always taboo and
not
bad.
paying the house off.
And the house. We didn't pay the mortgage off, so we're not full Dave Ramseyites, if you will, and I don't believe that you should pay off your mortgage.
And we've learned a lot since, but that was a really great step towards knowing what we wanted.
Yeah.
But then
I do remember the final thing, right? Let me just say this. We got a tax refund. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I was nervous.
And
it was like a $6,000 tax refund. And we had very little money in emergency, very little savings, because we were living paycheck to paycheck. We weren't making a lot, but we were just trying to get by. And I remember calling my dad, and I just said, "Hey, Dad, we're getting a $6,500 or $6,000 tax refund, and there's $6,000 left in our student loan or the car." It was one or the other. I think it was the student loan, because we paid the car off first with the snowball. Anyway, he's like, "Well, what do you think you should do?" I'm like, "Well, that's why I'm calling you." And he kind of left it in my court, but I just felt that we just needed to get free and just be done. So I remember we just dropped that amount. We celebrated with beans and rice or whatever that night. And really since then, we've been debt free, minus our mortgage, like I said, which I don't believe in paying that off. But so that was a big turning point. Was just crushing Dave Ramsey. And I love what you said, the breadcrumbs, because I really do think it was meeting different people, seeing different lifestyles, and then knowing that there's more to life than just 9 to 5 or 7 to 2 or 6 to 2, whatever your shift is, going home, watching TV, playing video games, which we should talk about, and those other things, and then doing it all over again and hating your job on Monday. And I can remember towards the end of the Coast Guard, I would get up every single Monday morning and just be like, "Are you kidding me?" Again.
Yeah. And I saw that, and so obviously that has an effect on your marriage. When your spouse isn't fulfilled or happy in what they're doing, that you feel that. And so now we're debt free, but we were still okay, well, now what?
Right.
Now we're debt free.
So the problems
we're
don't just
still-
end. Do the
right.
problems end?
No, absolutely
Okay.
not.
And the more money you make, the problems typically go away, right?
No, absolutely not. I think they
don't.
multiply.
Yes.
And we weren't making more money. We
No,
were just,
no. Well, we were kind of. We were
well-
bringing in more.
we were technically bringing in more because we were debt free,
debt, right.
but we were very frugal and we knew where every penny was going
We
and
kept
all of
living
that.
that way.
But even after that, I was like, okay, so now what? Do we keep doing this? Do we keep doing the 9 to 5? Do I keep teaching? Do you keep doing the Coast Guard? And I would say the next breadcrumb,
Was.
a person.
Yes, but before that,
Oh, I don't know.
the houses.
Oh yeah, we did start doing the houses.
So
In the
Angela,
summer.
so I worked with Angela's dad before we got married, and he was flipping houses, and I learned how to
Construction.
do a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Tile, drywall,
Yep.
paint, some electrical. Like I learned how to do pretty much everything, which was fantastic skills to learn. I know how to do a lot of things. Now I just don't like to do them because I feel like my time is a little bit more valuable. But I still do them. So yeah, so we got aggressive. We found 2 investors, family, local, 2 investors that helped us, along with some of our own cash that we have accumulated, to buy 2 properties. We bought a house, both in the same town that we were in. We
Yeah.
bought a house that we wholesaled, so we bought it for cheap, on the cheap, for cash.
Yeah.
And then the realtor we were working with had a buyer already, so all we needed to do was get it livable and pass inspections, use of occupancy, and then we flipped it over. I think we made 10 or 15,000. It wasn't much, but it was like, holy cow!
Right.
Like it was enough,
Right.
Right?
And it was
Thinking back, we
yeah.
should have freaking kept that place. Because it was a dual house. There was
I
a house in the
know.
front,
And
and then
the
there was a
rental
garage
in
in
the
the back.
back.
There was an apartment with 2 bedrooms. Oh,
It's okay. We didn't know.
that was a good
But
one. We didn't
the
know.
other thing
We didn't
was,
know.
I look back and for the summer, like as a school teacher, there's a lot of things that I could have used my time doing, but I was passionate about building. I grew up obviously with my dad, and I worked a lot with my dad, and I watched my dad, and so I've always loved building, design, renovation, things like that. And this is when foreclosures were like, you could find a foreclosure
Down the street, yeah, they're
and so
everywhere.
I knew what to look for because my parents had kind of instilled that and taught that to me. And so instead of teaching summer school or taking the summer off or going to get a
Boring.
retail job, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And so I took the opportunity, we took the opportunity to work together and use our summers or the times that he was home during my time off to flip these houses.
And that was tough. Like we need to talk about that a little bit. So you would either go to school or teach or do something, and then we would go do work. I would go to work, and I forget if I was doing day shift or I was doing overnights. I think I was doing a lot of
Overnights.
overnights. Yeah, 2 days on, 2 days off. I would go to work, and then once I got off, kind of like a firefighter schedule, once I got off, we would go right to these houses, and we would work for 10, 12 hours.
Right.
I don't know if you remember just doing pizza
did,
nights
yes.
on the counter, on the floor. Like we would go to work because we didn't have specific goals yet, but we knew there was more out there
Right.
than what we
What we
had
were
currently doing. And so, now we have very specific goals on where we're going, what we want to do. Sometimes they're a little hazy, but we just worked, and we read books. I remember we bought that How to Flip Houses book that had all those checklists, if you remember. I think we still have it somewhere.
Sure do.
Yeah. And we went to town. So we did the first one. We wholesaled it. That was a good transaction. And then the
Used
next
that,
one.
bought
yep,
the next one.
was Scott Ave, if you remember.
I do remember.
That one was a tough one. That was almost a full gut job.
It was.
And we tried to get smart and bring on a GC, someone to help us with it. He ended up screwing us big time. So we ended up doing 90% of the work.
Yeah, we learned
nice
a lot.
painter. The painter was a nice guy, though.
We
It's kinda
learned
crazy.
a lot that house. Yeah.
But that house looked real good.
It did,
It's a good-looking
but I
house.
would say it kind of hit a point where the market started to slow down, and
did.
so we got to the point where we were gonna have to put
Hold.
we were gonna put our house
That's right,
on the
yeah.
market and have that one on the market, and whichever one sold, like we would just live in the other
Move.
one. And I remember being like,
This is risky.
this is awful, but that was like the worst case scenario. And now looking back, it's like we would have had a brand new house
Yeah.
to live in either way.
Yeah.
So the Lord ended up selling it like right within that month that we decided to do that. So it all
It
worked out.
Yeah, yeah.
But we learned a lot that house.
So then we sold that one. I'm pretty sure we broke even, made almost nothing
Yeah,
because
it
I know
was-
we paid back people and gave them
yeah.
some profit. instead. And then we sold our primary house, and we already talked about that in the beginning, sold our primary house. So real estate has always kind of been a thing for us. Angela loves design, and we get to work together. Now, in the middle of that, we started to meet some people, and I met my mentor, Steve, who was a big part of my self-development and my growth. And without going through too much detail, I've done other podcasts, just kind of about that on the McGuire Enterprise podcast. You could check that out, which is mainly focused on business. But he was a huge factor in seeing what could be done. I had never met anybody that was making six figures, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 a year. And so the fact that this guy who was making that gave me his time, energy, and coaching was like, I need to absorb everything. Now, we want to get Angela's perspective here too, because it's different. So I'm seeing someone that's giving me all this time, energy, and effort, and literally giving me cheat codes to get ahead in life, to have a lifestyle where I can be with my family. I can work whenever I want, and I can have financial freedom. I was like, I am sold. So that's when I got into financial planning, got licensed with him and the firm, and became a representative of Primerica. Got my licenses, all my series licenses, my life insurance licenses, and just went off to the races. Now, one thing that is very unique is that it was 100% commission. So there was no salary, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. And by this time, we had decided, I'm going to go all in on financial planning versus go the military and the FBI route. So I don't know if you want to take on, but I do remember I got started with them on April 13th of 2016, which was my birthday. So instead of going out partying and being crazy with my wife and spending time, what we decided to do is, no, let's get serious about our life. Let's sign up for this program where I can now get my financial licenses and make infinite amounts of money depending on how much I want to work. So that kind of was a very pivotal point.
For sure it was. I would say, again, God brought other people into our lives to see different lifestyles, even way before that, like people that were willing to give us their vacation house for a week or a weekend, or, we'd see different like snippets of people's life, and they let us into those. I started nannying for a very dear family that I still keep in touch with today, and like just seeing their lifestyle and what they were doing, and the traveling they were doing, and they both own their own business. Letting us borrow their beach house, like so many little things leading up to meeting Steve and Shai. And I think, the Lord was just continuing to prepare our hearts and seeing something totally different. So we met Steve and Shai, and I think seeing their lifestyle and them being able to be around their kids and watch their kids grow up and travel. They were traveling a lot.
And doing volunteer work.
Volunteering at the church.
Where are they getting all this time?
And so I saw that, but I didn't fully believe that was something we could have ourselves. And I don't know what was holding me back, but it was just like, well, that's great and all, but
it's not meant for us.
It was almost too good to be true. Like, how can we in our 20s, we were still
25, 26,
20s, how can we have that? That doesn't even make sense. But I knew that James was miserable. So that was the other thing that was like driving me to say that it was something that we were willing to try. Was because I knew he wasn't happy. I knew he didn't love the Coast Guard. I knew he didn't want to continue to do that. And again, there was just this undertow of like, we got to be doing something different. I don't want the rat race. I don't want the 9 to 5. I want to do something bigger. We want to do something better. And I think our hearts were in that same direction. So that kind of propelled us forward. So he comes to me with this financial planning thing. I had never heard of such things.
And what did you say? Should I say what you said?
Yeah, because I don't even remember.
Are you crazy? That's not going to work. What do you know about finances?
That sounds right.
So ladies, be careful. Now we've gone on from that, but ladies, be careful. You can take your husband on to Mount Everest with one word, and you can also bring him down to Death Valley with one word. And that will literally that will kill the mood, that will kill his vision, that will kill his dreaming, that will kill his gold mindset. And so those are the things that you have to be careful of, because what you say, what my wife tells me, can either make me shoot for the moon or can make me shoot for the grass. And so Angela's always been supportive as we grew. But I think early on it was very like, I need to see proof that this actually works. And the proof is, gentlemen, this is typically how it works. Ladies like security. And security to them most of the time means the lights are on, the water works, you have money in the bank, and you're not drowning in debt. That's security for most women. So for Angela, until I started making money and she started seeing paychecks come in from financial planning and me working with clients, which took a while because it was a skill that I had to hone in on, there was a lack of belief. And I'm pretty sure that's pretty accurate.
That's very accurate.
And that's okay, because I've been very negative in certain aspects, and I think you'd agree, like you've grown exponentially from...
Yeah, we both have.
Yeah. So. And
that was, so at that time I was teaching and then nannying in the summer. And
you were basically, my wife is incredible. We were waking up, if you remember, at 4:45 in the morning, hitting the gym, and then she would go to work at what? You had to be there by 7:30, so you'd leave the house at like 6:45 because you had a 40-minute drive.
We were living in Delaware at the time. We had moved to Delaware, sold our house. We were renting, which we can get to that too, but yeah, I was driving about 45 minutes.
And this is a young lady who does not love to wake up early, so she was motivated and crushing it.
We both were.
At 4:45, we were just crushing it. But she was basically single-handedly providing for the family. We went super lean. We sold our house in Pennsylvania, moved and rented in Delaware, and we said, we're going to make this financial thing a go because I see a future here. And she was teaching at a school. You were making what, $30,000 a year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think my first year in business, I think I made like full time, which would have been 2017. I think I did 25,000, maybe 30,000. It was nothing. It was no money. And you made 20 or 30,000. So we made a whopping 50, 60,000 together in 2017.
16, 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It was difficult, but I just remember him being excited, and I think that's what also like made me buckle down. Was like, okay, he's serious about this, and I'm gonna support him. Even though he knew there was a little piece of me that was like, I don't know about this. But he was so excited. And for the first time, it was like, he's excited to get up. He's really putting all of his energy and effort into this. And so I'm just going to support him in this. And how I do that in that stage of life was to work and to get up and take care of things and have a consistent paycheck so that he could hone in on his skills and get really good at financial planning.
I got pretty good.
Which he did get very good. And I would say one of the main turning points for me was when he won a trip through Primerica. We were sitting at like one of the big conferences. Obviously, we couldn't afford a trip, so now we have earned this free trip. And I was like, maybe this thing does actually work. Like, here we are
as we're looking on Marco Island, out at the beach at like the 20th story. Yeah. It was a good trip.
It was a good trip.
Then we went to the Dominican. We did the Dominican.
And so he did earn a few trips with them. But I remember watching other people, like meeting other people our age or just like a little bit older, making it work. And so I think that for me was the turning point where I was like, oh, okay, if we do this together, this will work.
Yeah. So again, I think you've got to come together. That was one big point is we came together, we talked about it. Hey, I really want to do this. You saw the light in my eyes. You weren't 100% sure if it was going to work, but you saw that I was going to do it. You saw that Steve had good character and Shy and their family. And so there's that aspect as well. I think you need to do your research and you do due diligence. Absolutely great company that I worked with. Still am licensed with them. Don't do it full time anymore just because of other businesses. But super grateful for that opportunity. And through 2016, when I really started kind of part-time getting my licenses, to 2023, really last year, I stepped back and handed my clients off to Steve. and his team to help manage them because it's just getting too busy. But let's talk briefly about that, and then I want to kind of fast forward a little bit in the remaining time. Throughout me making no money with financial planning and you doing a lot of the work, the things we were doing along the way was developing ourselves.
Yeah.
Through reading, through listening to podcasts. I'm kind of a nerd.
That's fair.
Not a full nerd, just like a half nerd. And I like tech, and I used to love video games. And when I was in the Coast Guard, there was nothing to do on base a lot of times, so I just play video games there with the team. And I would do it at home as well. And I wouldn't say I'm ashamed, but I just didn't know anything different.
Right.
And so when I had this mental shift, this mindset shift, when I started saying we need to do more, we put the games away, and I'd be reading, and I used to hate reading. And we crushed through books. I think you read a few. Yeah. But I would just like sit in the living room, no TV, and I would just eat up every book that I could that my mentor gave to me. Think and Grow Rich, Beyond Positive Thinking, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, those are just some of the ones that stick out to me. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Just tons of books. I think I read 15 or 20 books like the first year I really started like going. And so I think you probably saw some of those things.
Yeah.
And we're like, he's dead serious. Like, we've got to pursue this in that way. And so I would say is your actions have to match your words.
Absolutely.
Right? If I say I'm going to go do something, but when I get home from work, I do nothing else to acquire said goal or dream, then my actions speak way louder than my words.
Right.
And so I think for me, I was more along the lines of like, let me just go do it. I'm just going to act. I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to hone in my skills, and eventually it's going to pop up. So fast forwarding, we rented for 2 years. Income started to climb. We did end up making 6 figures in the 2020, I think 2020, 2021. We ended up doing pretty well with financial planning. But in 2020, there was kind of this change. We moved back up to New England, and we were doing really well, and I knew the trajectory was going to be good. There was just something missing, and I think, to be honest, it was a team, it was a business, it was managers, it was team members, it was admin, it was back office. It was just bigger than just one man, because it was just me, right? Whatever I could do, however many people I could see in a day, that's what I could do. And so I think it was more than that. And there's a few other things in there as well. But so I got together with Jeff and Angela, and Jeff brought this idea of this crumble cookies thing up that he heard about. He's my brother. He lives out in Arizona. He's like, hey, we should look into this crumble thing. And we started talking about it. We started doing some research online. I went out and visited Arizona and checked out some of the stores, and I do remember there being a lot of conflict, not necessarily between us, but like a big decision, because Primerica was going well, financial planning was going really well, and are we really going to stop that and go try this other thing that we don't know is going to work? Yeah.
I would say too, through that like growth phase that he was talking about, through reading, through all the extra things that he was doing, had he not been doing that, I probably would have felt differently about this new venture and what was he actually serious about it? Was he on the right path? But the other thing I will say is I was behind him in that season of life. He definitely was the one that was pushing us, was searching, was reading the books, was listening to the podcasts, was doing all the things. I was definitely a lot more like, well, maybe this is too much work. Like, this seems like maybe it's not what I thought it was going to be. Maybe maybe this isn't, I'm not cracked up for this. I'm not meant to be the wife of somebody who's doing this. So for a while, I would say, I'm sure he would agree, but he probably felt like he was pulling me because he was. And so that's where I kind of eventually felt the pull and was more so convicted of like, how am I supporting him in this? in this season, now I need to be supporting him by like coming alongside him, asking him about the books, reading the books with him, listening to the podcasts, doing all those extra things with him so that I am not an extra weight. And I think really that's where he was able to take off, because I was no longer a weight. I was now helping him and supporting him and spurring him on. So I think that was really important too, for you to be able to, that year that you made the six figures was because I was finally supporting as much as I could. And that allowed me, now my roles changed too. When he was making that, I wasn't working and I was able to do some home staging. We were building our home.
Stuff you actually were
Stuff
passionate
that I
about
wanted
and loved to do.
Right, which looked different for
Did
us
a couple
too.
kitchen designs.
Yep, was able to do a lot of that stuff. So it was cool to see us working together. Kind of allowed us both to pursue things that we enjoyed and wanted to be doing.
But it just goes back to your two, I don't want to say oxes, your two horses or whatever, yoked together. And when you're pulling together, you can really accomplish anything. When one is pulling the other.
And behind the other,
and behind the other, it becomes very difficult, it becomes wearing, it becomes challenging. And I'll tell you, and this doesn't change from the day you get married or the day you get into business to today, literally today. The decisions that you have to make when you're a business owner, and the decisions that you have to make as a husband or a wife, right? A husband as the leader of the house and leading the family doesn't mean that you make all the decisions on your own. You do them with your spouse, but you take responsibility for them, because that's what we're called to do. But the decisions don't always align. I'm thinking business decisions here specifically, that there's some business decisions that I've had to make that are for the good of the business, to make the business go forward, that you would not want to make, or have said, I wouldn't do that, or I don't want that to happen, or that's probably not the right direction that I personally would want. But when you look at it logically and you see the totality of the circumstances, that might be the decision that has to be made. So I think alignment is very, very important, but then at some points, and this is why we're doing this podcast, because marriage is hard enough. Then you go and throw a business in it, and you throw 150 employees in it, and it becomes complicated. And so not every decision is going to be the right decision. But the family is the most important. Obviously, faith is most important, then the family, and then the business. But sometimes the business has to be separated, and there's going to be decisions that you have to make there that may not make your partner or your spouse happy, which is why sometimes I would suggest don't have your partner in the business at all.
And we can
definitely talk more about that. So we ended up moving into Crumble in 2020, and Angela was literally my right-hand girl. Her and I were literally being the general managers of our first location, because we fired our first manager, and we opened it together, obviously with our partner Jeff, who's my brother, and Steve. And that was a lot. Those were some really tough days, because we knew nothing about bakeries. We ended up, without going into too much detail, but that was a new level of conflict for our marriage. We were like ships just passing in the night. And I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I think we should save this for a whole nother episode, because there's just so much to unpack.
A lot of detail.
When we switched from financial planning to Crumble, because that was
self-employed
a whole nother world of business.
Complexity.
We saw one thing, it's just different. And so I think Crumble should be its own
episode.
Its own beast.
I'm getting the nod. We should cut this one before it gets too emotional, maybe. Maybe not, no.
I just think there's a lot to unpack.
There's definitely a lot to unpack. But it was emotional for everybody. There was long days, super late nights. And thankfully, we didn't have a daughter at the time, because that would have been very tough. But everything happens for a reason. So that's kind of where we are today. Now we have 7 Crumbles open, and Angela has gone through a myriad of roles, and I think maybe we should do an episode on Crumble and just marriage and business as that evolved. So from the start to as it evolved. So maybe we'll do an episode on that. Just for those of you who are in that realm, that franchise realm, that business startup realm, what does it look like for your spouse? Where should you help? Should you not help? Should you just stay away?
Right.
Should you be involved? Because it is very complex and it does get very emotional, and there's money involved. And whenever there's money involved, you know, it makes things complex, it makes things complicated. Yeah. And there's that level of security. And do we quit the job? Does the wife quit? Does the husband quit? Is it the wife's side hustle or side hobby? Or right? Because I've seen that happen, and that's disastrous. So I think we could definitely talk about that on another go around. Yeah, but
grateful for where we're at today.
Yeah, I would say, and maybe a couple closing thoughts on your end, but I would say that there's no maybe one key pivotal moment. I would say maybe the biggest pivotal moment was meeting Steve and getting mentorship on what we want the future to maybe look like.
Right.
And so, you know, if you guys are struggling with that, business owners, married couples, if you're struggling with that, find counsel. And I don't mean like a legit counselor. Like, you totally could. Maybe you should. We probably should. Get some maintenance, get an oil change or whatnot, rotate the tires. But find someone you trust in that has been where you are and has accomplished it and succeeded well, right? Don't go to your broke uncle for advice on how to get out of debt. That doesn't work.
Right.
Don't go to a failing business owner on how to run a business.
Right.
Don't go to a failing marriage on how to run a marriage. Find people that are farther along than you are, if you agree, and talk to them.
Yep.
Take them out to lunch, take them to dinner, have them over, grab a coffee.
Yep.
Figure those things out and seek counsel. Because we've done that in every step. We've done that in the marriage step. We've done that in our moving step. We talked with plenty of people when we were moving. Yeah. From Hawaii to Pennsylvania. We talked with people when I was going to jump into financial planning, if you remember. Yeah.
When we talked to New Hampshire.
Talked to a lot of people, and they had a lot of different views on when we decided to move back to New Hampshire. I think maybe we talked to a few less people when we moved away from New Hampshire, although I did talk with a few people, for sure. And we're currently not talking to anyone about anything. So maybe that's a good call. But I don't know if you have a couple key takeaways on that.
Yeah, definitely finding people that can encourage you and teach you and pour into you. But I think also being open to opportunities is a huge part of all of this. I think had we not been open to other ventures, other things, other people, we would never be where we are today. And so I'm grateful that the Lord has presented us with opportunities, but I also think it's important to get uncomfortable, because all of those situations that we were presented were uncomfortable situations because they were new, they were challenging, they were unknowns. But saying, like, you know what, yes, because I want something different, I'm willing to go through the hard things or the unknowns.
Beep. No, you weren't swearing. I didn't want to beep. I didn't know if I needed to beep you out. No. Okay, good. We're good.
But just be open to other opportunities and trying different things. And what's the worst that happens? Sometimes our worst case scenario is not actually that bad, and what could come out of it is a lot better.
Well, and I'll leave everybody with this one quote, that there's 2 types of pain. There's the pain of change, or there's the pain of regret. And what I think about is, in 20 or 30 years, when my kids are older and grown and married, do I want to look back and say, man, I regret that we didn't open 10 more locations. I regret that I didn't take that chance with that person who reached out to do more business. I regret. Or do I say, man, this is really going to suck for like a month, 2 months, 6 months, maybe a year. But when we get through that hump of growth or of change, it's going to be 10x better. And so I've always thought about that, and I can't take credit for that. I heard it from somewhere, but it's either the pain of change or the pain of regret. And I just know that the regret is going to be 50 times harder than the pain of change.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that wraps up this episode of our story. Quick synopsis of it, summary. We will dive into it probably more as we continue to these episodes, because looking back and reflecting on history is important, but not using it to reflect on too much is probably not the best. So I want to keep moving forward, and crush it. So we will send out some notes here on the podcast. Let us know what you think. Send this to somebody who hasn't heard about what we're doing, Married Making Millions. Again, we want to build success within business and resilience in your marriage. Thanks for listening.
Bye.